Have you ever hit a moment where success wasn't enough? Where the weight of your past, the scars no one sees, or the doubts you don't dare to voice keep you from breaking through to the life you know you're capable? Maybe you've achieved things others only dream of. Maybe deep down, there's still something holding you back, something you can't quite name, yet it's there, shadowing your every step forward. If that strikes you at a chord, take a breath. You have just found your people. You're not alone. Welcome to That Shit Does Not Define You, Stories of Hope. I'm Athena Captain, joined by my co-host, Jada Haycraft, and this isn't just another podcast. This is a space to strip away labels, shame, and the invisible barriers that have held you back.
With each podcast, we will bring you raw, unfiltered stories of resilience, real people who have defied the odds to rewrite their narratives and give you the strategies, systems, and tools to do the same. This isn't theory, it's lived experience. It's practical, it's powerful, and it's personal. Whether you're ready to claw your way out of rock bottom or shatter the invisible ceiling standing between you and your highest potential, this podcast is your roadmap to rise. Your next breakthrough starts here. Let's get started. It's time to rewrite your narrative.
Have you ever looked around the room and thought, I don't belong here? Or have you felt any moment where you're like, somebody's going to figure out I'm not smart enough, not talented enough, or not capable enough? Have you ever felt that in your stomach or thought it? That little voice in your head telling you you're a fraud? That, friends, is called imposter syndrome. And that's the truth. And you're not alone. And today we're going to unpack what that is. And we have a special guest. So we're excited. Jada, what's happening today?
Yeah, well, this week we have a special guest, Kyle Draper, and Kyle is a speaker, an author, and a multiple business owner. He's passionate about Jesus, family, and helping you succeed. If you've listened to our other podcast, Referral Roadmap, you've likely heard an interview with Kyle before. However, today's going to be a little bit different. Today, we're diving into the truth about imposter syndrome, as Athena mentioned, and we can't wait to embark on this journey with you. So to kick us off, I'll start by sharing some statistics about imposter syndrome, if that's okay with you, Athena.
You know we got to start with the science. We get all mushy-feely. We do that, and we always make sure that we tell the story and then give you practical tips, but we got to start with some science. So go for it.
Got to start with it. Awesome. Well, so imposter syndrome defined is that internalized belief that one's achievements are due to luck, timing, or external factors, not the ability or efforts of that person. So it leads into fear of being exposed as a fraud. The origin of the term, it was coined in 1978 by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes in their research on high-achieving women in the psychology theory research and practice. So key oversight or insight for this is over 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives, according to the Internal Journal of Behavioral Science in 2011, with high achievers particularly susceptible.
Isn't that weird?
That's a high percentage.
That's weird that high achievers feel it more than others.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it makes sense. If I really think about it, logically, I can get there. But the brain science of self-doubt, the science behind that is the amygdala. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's the brain's fear center. Becomes hyperactive during self-critical thoughts or perceived threats of failure. And this can trigger that fight or flight response, making imposter syndrome feel emotionally overwhelming. And a key study on that was research from Dr. Tara Stewart in Neuroscience for Leadership in 2019. It shows that repetitive negative thoughts reinforce neural pathways of self-doubt. And the good news is neuroplasty allows us to rewire those thought patterns. So there is good news for us today. And in that study, they also found that perfectionists are significantly more likely to experience imposter syndrome that lead to anxiety, burnout, and reduced performance. Another study that I wanted to share was the imposter syndrome affects success, but it doesn't stop it. So the science behind that is a surprising study published in the Personality and Individual Differences in 2020 found that individuals experiencing imposter syndrome often continue to succeed despite their self-doubt, but at a personal cost. So they work harder, they over-prepare, overperform to quote unquote cover up their perceived inadequacy, leading to that exhaustion and burnout that we talked about. And last but not least, I do have one more fact is imposter syndrome thrives in silence, and the science behind that is shame and secrecy exacerbate imposter syndrome. Dr. Brene Brown's research on vulnerability shows that talking about our feelings of inadequacy with trusted people reduces the power of imposter syndrome. So the key study in 2014 in the Journal of Journal of Educational Psychology found that simply acknowledging imposter syndrome to others will significantly reduce its impact. So that was a lot of facts and figures today. So honestly, I just want to welcome our guest, Kyle Draper. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for having me. It's always an honor.
Well, we are so excited. And, I just want to start with Kyle. Thank you for, this is a sensitive subject, right? We're going to ask you to be raw and honest, which is what we're doing on this podcast. And of course, we just heard a lot of science that proves this is a real thing.
Yeah.
But for Kyle, just because the audience, you own multiple businesses and you're extremely successful, you speak all over, the nation and someday the world. So how are you going to talk about imposter syndrome? Tell us a little bit about your story and why, you're a good person to talk to about this.
I think you and Jada kind of bamboozled me. I think y'all thought, who is the biggest imposter that we know?
No.
Oh, whatever.
That is falsely achieving. And
Not
so
a
here
chance.
I am. So, I remember, oh my gosh, I don't know that, like, what I was shocked about with the data is, like, who the heck are the 30% that don't ever find themselves affected by imposter syndrome? But I do guess there probably is a lower third of our world that they never sign up for a job that's above what they believe they can do, right? Like, they don't have a desire to achieve a ton. And so it could make sense that if I just stayed way down there, that I could just kind of, coast through life and never struggle with imposter syndrome. But I remember for me, so the earliest I remember it is when I was 14, I was a freshman in high school, and God put this dream in my heart to start a Bible study for my friends. And my immediate response was like, God, that's so dumb. Like, the cool kids don't start Bible studies. Nobody, like, no one's going to come. Like, this is a horrible idea, And instantly I thought, well, I don't know the Bible good enough to do this. And I don't have a relationship with God that's worthy of teaching other people how to have their own relationship. And so immediate imposter syndrome set in. And so the first thing I had to do was run and ask my parents. I was like, hey, if I start this, will y'all teach it? Because I'm not good enough. And that was that first run-in with truly feeling like, who am I to take on something as important as this? I'm a nobody, And then I remember when I became a pastor at 20 years old, and I'm looking around the room, and all of my volunteers are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And I'm like, who's going to lead this guy? I haven't been through life. I think I'd kissed one girl at that point. And so I don't know how many people knew that, but secretly to myself, I'm like, what a freaking loser I am. I'm an adult. I haven't even hardly kissed any girls. And that was my kind of, bar of success at the time for some reason. And so then for 10 years as a pastor, I'm trying to lead people older than me, more established than me. And so I feel like my entire life has been overcoming imposter syndrome.
Well, we asked you to be here because we knew you'd be honest, but not only have you overcome it, but you also are a coach and you're a mentor, and you speak on this subject to people, I know, in the lending industry, real estate industry. And so I love that you're honest about it so that you can take that and share that with the people that you lead. You led at church, but now you lead nationally in multiple areas. So I want to dig a little bit here. So you kind of just answered this, but when you first realized imposter syndrome was holding you back, did you feel that after you went through that at the church, when you went into, let's say, traditional work, right? Outside of the religious sect, did you feel imposter syndrome then, or did you feel like you belonged immediately?
Oh, I don't know if I'm like messed up. I don't think I've ever felt like I belonged anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of that is like just trying to be humble, but I think some of that is allowing humility to turn into truly feeling inferior to everybody else. And but what I've noticed,
Yeah.
early on with imposter syndrome, I very quickly went and found the expert. Right? In high school, it was my parents. In ministry, it was other pastors that had been there longer than me. And I would ask them to do the really important times in the meeting where I should be talking, but I didn't feel like I was worthy. And so I would ask them to do it. And as it's been a little over 12 years now since I've been out of church ministry and in the business world. And, Athena, what I've noticed the most, and I was actually just coaching a guy through this last weekend, because he brought up how I just have to get over this fear. And that's what this whole complex is, right? It's the fear of being found out. It's the fear of saying the wrong thing. It's the fear of giving the wrong advice, right? Like all those things. And what I found is that early on, I was always trying to figure out, well, if I can just minimize the fear, then I can move forward. If I can just minimize the fear, then I can move forward. What I've learned now in the last couple of years is, number one, that fear is a good thing. And so the absence of fear is a very dangerous life, right? If I have zero fear of life without my wife,
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, I'm going to live a very different life,
Right?
than if I'm fearful of like, she could leave my butt and take my kids. And that is not the life I want for myself.
She's pretty spectacular. So
she is very spectacular, but there's a healthy fear there, right? That's why the Bible talks about the fear of the Lord. Not that he's this scary guy, but that fear allows us to make good decisions when we leverage it. And so what I've learned is it's not about minimizing fear. It's about maximizing purpose.
That's a mic drop right there, Jada. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like, I love sharks. And I've always wanted to like get in a cage with not with a great white, right? Like they would be on the outside of that cage and I would be on the inside of that cage. And for me to do that, I can't spend months going, they're probably nice. They have a bad rap. They bit some people, but like they probably want me in the water. They, like they're sharp, their teeth are sharp, but they don't want to touch them to me. You would go, you're a moron, dude. That's a like you're giving yourself horrible advice. And so the only way for me to overcome that fear is to maximize my desire to achieve something. And that goes in because you and I both speak a ton. And so as I'm sure you get asked, man, how speaking's so scary. Like, how do you how are you not afraid? And I go, what are you talking about? I want to throw up before I speak every time. And they're like, really? Why do you keep doing it? Because the purpose of it far outweighs the fear that it brings. And so that I think I think that shrinks imposter syndrome in moments. But at 42 years old, I can't speak to, I've overcome it. I don't have it anymore. And so it's more about developing tools to help us navigate it more so than trying to minimize it.
Yeah. Amen to that. I mean, I hope the listeners are hearing that because we're not saying it goes away. Interesting enough, you guys know my mentor, Darren Hardy. He literally told my business partner asked him, what's your biggest fear? And he kept asking him this question every time he saw him for 2 years. And it was like 8 times he saw him. Finally, the last time he said, I'm afraid somebody's going to look at me and think I'm a joke. So this is a guy that has achieved, so much success. He's still dealing with it, hundreds of millions of dollars, best-selling books, the whole thing. He's amazing. And by the way, he's not a fraud, right? But that's still happening. So you're right. You're not going to get over it. You get through it. Hey, let me ask you some questions. When your own experience and you're coaching people, what are some of the thoughts and beliefs that we tell ourselves that feed imposter syndrome? Have you seen any correlation or anything that's really familiar?
Yeah,
or the same?
I think there's a few that probably most people have, right? That we're not good enough.
Yeah.
That our my upbringing didn't create me for this.
Yeah.
You know, nobody cares. I think the world of social media, which has really been my world for the last decade, it has created just such a false sense of identity and acceptance. And so now we live in a world where, you know, somebody goes, well, I did that. I made a video teaching about this subject and 4 people saw it. And so now all of a sudden they're a fraud. Nobody cares. Nobody believes them. When if I stop them long enough to go, whoa, 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 whoa. When's the last time you had coffee with somebody? Yesterday. At any point in that coffee, did they ask you for your advice? Yeah, like 4 different times. Then people value your opinion. We've got to stop letting the internet set the precedent for what we are and what we aren't. Because we do life with people every day. And I'm constantly having people ask me questions. But then I go to the internet and my video got 4 views. And all of that goes away because we've all been told that, like, this is what matters. If you want to be a big deal, you got to get famous. You got to go viral. You got to. And so I'm deviating from the original question, Athena, and I apologize.
Keep going, bro. Keep going. Love it.
But I also think that this is why, like, who we allow around us matters.
Yeah.
Because we all have people in our lives that do genuinely love us, but they don't understand what we're trying to do. And so in their attempt to protect you, they will actually convince you that you're not good enough. And they don't see it that way. They may have never said the words like, Athena, you can't do that. But they've said enough, and you've shared enough ideas that they've kind of pooped on, that you start to go, man, I just don't even think Jerry believes in this. Right? For those of you who don't know, that's Athena's husband, right? So the context makes sense. And Jada's dad. So, and so then I can get mad at Lana, my wife.
Yeah.
And I go, why don't you believe in me? And she goes, what? What do you mean? And so we've got to be so careful who we let around us, who we share our vision with, because as the carrier of our own visions, God didn't give my vision to everybody. And so there's parts of my vision that, like, Lana doesn't even know, because she doesn't understand what I'm trying to do. And that's not bad, right? God designed us to do different things.
Hey, Kyle, I just have to jump in there. I absolutely agree. And Jada knows this. I'm reluctant. You know what it is. I'm reluctant when people say, what's your ultimate goal? Very few people know what the real ultimate goal is. Because that ultimate goal is so beyond what they could believe is possible, right? And let's be honest, I am fighting to believe it's possible.
100%.
So, right? I am fighting. So I don't share it with a lot of people. I only share it with the people who I know will say, if that's what God put on your heart, then that's what's going to come true, because I'm fighting every day to believe I'm capable of making that. So I absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
It's so true. Like, one of my, like, big, hairy, audacious goals is, you know, like, I know for a fact I will be on a stage in a stadium, speaking to 100,000 people one day.
Absolutely.
You know, like, that's one of my big dreams. But I can't just go around saying that to people, because that sounds stupid. Like, LeBron James does that. You know, Oprah does that. Kyle Draper doesn't do that. Not yet. And so we've got to be super careful, like, who we share things with. But we also, you know, I think a big piece to imposter syndrome is most people don't want to practice. They just want to achieve.
Ooh, another mic drop.
And so they spend all their time, right? Like, I'm going to speak in front of 100,000 people. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then you go, oh, cool. What are you doing now? Well, nothing. Okay. Well, no wonder you feel like an imposter, because you kind of are. You're not doing anything. But when for my journey, when it's like, when I got into the social media world, man, when you and I met, I was teaching classes to 3 people. And then sometimes it was 8. And then other times it was 1.
Yes.
And then it was 30. And then it was 60.
Right.
And then it's been several thousand, but then it'll go back to 5. And so, like, I just know that if I'm going to get where I want to go, I've got to take as many shots as I can and get as many reps in as I can. And most people don't want to put in the reps. And the more reps I put in, the more confident I feel in that environment. And so I think that's a huge piece to this whole thing.
So I think that goes back to, just for the listeners, what you're saying here is that fear, we all feel it. It's not really a bad thing. And that one of the tools, I was just going to ask you, what is a tool that you would advise, or you do advise people to get through this? I do want to hear more tools or habits, but one of them you just said, and that is go do it. The more you do something, the more you feel confident about it. But what are some other things? So say you're talking to me and I'm one of your coachees, and there's a subject you could rip me apart right now on. What is something that somebody has, imposter syndrome over? What would be the tools, habits, and strategies you would say, hey, you guys, this is what you need to do?
So I think one great, I don't know if I'd quantify this as a tool or an exercise, but
okay.
It's to get greater clarity on who you're trying to be next. Because for me, if I just was like, you know what, I want to be like Oprah. Well, that's a pretty big jump from where I am to Oprah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's what a lot of people do, right? Like my 9-year-old right now, she wants to be a professional singer. And so literally the other day, she's like, I'm going to be the next Taylor Swift. And I'm trying so hard to like love my daughter while also going, okay, like let's think of some things that can be stepping stones in that direction that are a little bit more achievable. And so I think it's just really easy to like look at somebody that's 10 years, 20 years ahead of us and go, well, I want to be the next her. And now there's such a chasm between where you are and where you want to be that there's really nothing left to feel other than imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. Because that's not achievable tomorrow. And so if I can pull back and go, okay, what are the 8 people in between me and Oprah? Mm-hmm. Who's a year and a half ahead of me? Who I've written a couple books. So who's written 3? Who's the person with 5? Because if I want to be the guy that's written 100, that's a pretty wide margin that leaves me a ton of room to fail and to feel bad about myself. And so I think we need to have those appropriate stepping stones of progress so that we really do wake up every day and go, I can get to their level. And as I get to their level, I'm getting closer to the ultimate level that I want to be. And that to me is the most day-to-day way to kind of manage imposter syndrome.
That and just doing it. I mean, just getting out there and doing it.
Yeah,
doing it afraid.
My motto is ready, fire, aim. And so my team hates me most of the time because they're talking about ideas and they can tell, like, Kyle's done. He is checked out. He's already messaging people about this new product that we're talking about. And they're wanting to create additional layers and landing pages and SOPs. And I'm like, nope, I'm out. I'm going to go try to sell this to some people. And they're like, well, what are you going to try to sell? I don't know. But we're going to figure it out, And I would rather try and fail than plan and never try. And that's where a lot of people lose their momentum, is they just never actually try it. And I love to try, and I love to fail even more because it gets me closer to ultimately where I'm trying to go.
Do you think they don't try because of the imposter syndrome, or why do you think most people don't try?
I think they don't try because it always allows them to tell the story of what could have been.
Oh, wow.
So for example, for me, so for years, I mean, literally probably till I was in my mid 30s, I would tell people that I got pretty close to playing in the NFL, did not get close to playing in the NFL, that I was about to get a full ride scholarship to TCU. I was not about to get a full ride scholarship to TCU. But that was the story I told because it allowed me to hold on to something that technically hadn't expired because I hadn't tried it. And finally I hit an age where I was like, why do I care? Why do I care that people think I was a good football player? I really wasn't. And there was so much peace that came into my life when I started just telling people like, yeah, I was big enough to play, but like, I just wasn't passionate enough about it. And I quit on it. And because it just wasn't my thing. And it just became so freeing. And I think there's just a lot of people that love to still tell that story. That's like, if I didn't hurt my knee, I would have played college basketball. And it's like, bro, no, you wouldn't have. You wouldn't have. But as long as we don't officially fail, there's always this false sense of hope for what could have been. And you can even look at like research and the way neurons fire off in our brains that like, if this is what separates the high achievers from the not high achievers is if you and I talk about, like the three of us could brainstorm a great idea. Well, the endorphins fire off inside of us as if we've executed that idea. Like we're going to feel the highs, the rush. And if we're not careful, the thought of that idea will allow us to just move on to the next thing. And we'll look up and go, oh my gosh, we never actually started that podcast. Mm-hmm. Well, the high achiever realizes that that's not enough. And so then they actually go out and set to do what they planned. And most people can go get that high from just talking about it, that they never need to actually go do it.
That's scary.
Super scary.
That's really scary because it leaves so much potential wasted. And I think I think you and I agree with this. One thing I want people to hear is we understand that you face, 70% of us face the imposter syndrome. What Kyle and I really want you to hear is don't allow it to stop you. Because there's too much potential. There's too much you have to offer the world. That imposter syndrome is stopping you from delivering to the world.
Yeah.
And we don't want that for you. Speak a little bit to that because I know you have spoke that into my life and pushed me. And I know other people that you've done. So speak to that because you talk about that a lot.
There's a million people that could speak to this better than me that have actually achieved it at a far greater level than I have. But what I've adopted for 2025 is most of us, all of us, we've never been to the level we're trying to get to, right? Because it's the next level, right? So we haven't been there. And so to take it to video games, like you can't start thinking about how do I beat level 9 when it's like, bro, you're still on level 6. Why are you giving brain energy to that level? And so I think we're the same. And so what I am adopting is the thought, like I'm always working to get healthier, right? Losing weight. And so like I've never been 240 pounds. So I can't already know what to do, but I can ask the question, what would Kyle at 240 pounds eat for lunch today?
Right. There you go.
And I can begin to predict what I think that version of me would do. What would Kyle, if he was a good active dad, what would he do with his kids today? We all know the answers to those things, right? And so what I'm working on is training myself to realize like I can act before I am.
Yes.
I can take on the action of the millionaire before I may actually be a millionaire.
Yeah.
Right? If I were a millionaire, how would I look at my money different? Would I buy that on Amazon today if I were good with my money? Like, we know the answer to that question. And so I hope that it ultimately becomes a hack for how to act in a way before I am actually that person, so that I can actually become that person. Because otherwise it's so overwhelming to go, okay, well, I want to lose 100 pounds. Well, holy cow, like, that's a lot. And so then where do you start if all you see is the end result? And so that's how I'm kind of baby stepping my way into these decisions.
Any questions to that, Jada? Because I know you have to. Jada and I work with a number of clients. Anything you want to say to that, or any thoughts to that?
Man, I'm just soaking all this in. That is like, I feel like I could just mic drop every 5 seconds.
This is why we like Kyle Draper in the house. I'm telling you.
I know,
You
man.
guys,
I'm just soaking it up.
Y'all are ridiculous.
No, truly though.
I love it.
Man, I don't think I have any questions. Honestly, I am just soaking it all in. I think you have a lot of great knowledge for us, Kyle.
I think what's really important here is that people understand what you're saying. I really want people to hear you're obviously successful, and I know you have bigger dreams, but what you're saying is bite it off little by little, right? What are you going to do this year to get closer? And by doing it, we're going to do it afraid, but by doing it, then we're going to feel confident, and that, the imposter syndrome gets smaller and smaller.
Well, Athena, the other piece of this, and you and I have talked about this on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
But until you understand your identity, you'll always chase the imposter. And so if we're not careful, right? So for me and for you, our identity is rooted in Christ, right? And a part of that is, when we look at cars, and I'm not even a car guy. I don't know why I'm going to a car analogy.
You've been hanging out with my husband.
Because
you sound like Gary.
I couldn't name you 5 parts of a car. But there's a reason why, if I drive a Ford and something goes wrong, I don't take it to a Hyundai dealership. They would look at me and go, "What are you doing here?" "Well, you fix cars. My car needs to be fixed." "Yeah, but there's a better place called the Ford dealership that actually made your car, and it is more equipped to fix it and restore it." And so, I look at people that do not know their identity. Their identity is not rooted in anything. And so now that person is just blown around by the wind. They're blown around by every storm that shows up. And in one season, their social media following is what gives them identity, and that's what makes them feel confidence. And so while that's growing, they feel great. But then the minute something happens, like I'm thinking about all these people right now that have grown their success through TikTok, and now the government's like, "See ya." And I'm watching these videos where people are begging people, "Please follow me over here on this other platform, but please." And like their whole identity is at risk of being ripped away from them. And so I am so thankful that my identity is rooted in who created me. So that as the world changes, as seasons come and go, right? As people listening to this go from being single to being married to having kids, right? Jada is experiencing this whole new season of life. And oh my gosh, as unbelievable as motherhood is, the days are ticking down to when Jada goes, "Is this it? Is this what was supposed to ultimately fulfill me and bring me joy? Because I want to throw that thing in the trash."
Not literally.
Not literally. Well, maybe, but hopefully not. And so the world is just so good at saying, "Oh, you're not satisfied. You need to get married. You need to become a parent. You need to go find." And they're all shallow things if we're not rooted in something. And so that, like, I don't think there is any way to overcome imposter syndrome without understanding who created you and tapping into that source.
I want to speak to that because I have every reason to have imposter syndrome, and I do struggle with it occasionally when I'm stepping out, when I'm doing that thing, right? And I have every reason, given my history and where I came from, my childhood, all the things. I've shared a little bit of that in some of the podcasts so far. But one of the things I want to tell you guys is the thing that sustains me to keep going, to do it afraid, is knowing that there's a purpose behind it that's greater than me, that's beyond just me, and that in doing so, I have fulfilled my purpose here. That is the motivation that keeps me fighting. I mean, I'm in my 50s. I already have businesses that pay my bills. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I'm doing it because I'm not trying to get famous. I'm not even trying to get rich. I'm doing it because I was allowed to go through what I went through in life to get to this point, to help people that are listening right now, to bring in people like you, to help the person who isn't surrounded with people like I am, like you, to let them know, look, there are people, we're walking it, we're doing it, we get you. I don't, wherever you've come from. Jade and I were in one of the podcasts. I'm pulling out pictures right now, Kyle, of my childhood, because my next book that we're working on is my life story. And I was just telling Jade, I had forgotten how much I lived in motels and how many pictures I have of myself living in these motels. And then, they're not in great places, right? And I say that to say, I came from that. And now I'm doing this. If you guys don't think I fight imposter syndrome, you're crazy. But the reality is what Kyle just said to you, that identity, knowing the purpose, it's what gets me up every day when I'm tired and I'm cranky and I have a whole other business to run and a child with special needs to take care of and nonprofits. It's that thing. So I can't encourage you enough to listen to what he's saying. Find out what your identity is. Find out what your purpose is. And then allow that to be the factor that pushes you past it.
So, Athena, I want to ask you. Yeah. I know I'm on here for y'all to ask me things, but I want to ask you things.
Yeah.
So, for the listener, that they just kind of feel blah, like they're not on the verge of suicide, but they're not just living this life filled with zest and joy, and like, how are you coaching them to step a little bit towards whatever that purpose is for them?
So that's a great question. And the first thing I think we have to unpack is what is going on in your current life. What are the choices and decisions you're making right now that are creating the emotional circumstance that you find yourself in?
Yeah.
Before we go forward, we've got to identify and get honest with ourselves where we're at. What things are we allowing? What choices are we choosing? What actions are we not doing that we should be doing that are creating this emotional, what I call emotional quicksand? And you can have it in your life and you can have it in your business, but let's identify that. And then let's create a plan to do the opposite to those things. So that's step one. And then step two is where you want to go. Right. But the problem is, and Kyle, tell me if you find this differently in your coaching. I find I can't get people to move that forward until we get out of the quicksand. Like, we got to get them out of the quicksand first, identify what is the quicksand, get them, like, let's get them out now. And sometimes not all the way out, but let's get out enough so we can move forward.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes people get stuck in, they want to help other people, but it's like, hey bro, you need to help yourself first. Like, you're not even healthy enough to turn around and help other people. Yeah. And so I think that has to happen first. But then the beautiful part about that is what I love to coach around is really just asking the question like, hey, when you were at your lowest, who helped you out?
Mhm.
Was that an actual person? Was it a series of people? Was it a parent? Was it a friend? Like, let's identify that. And then how did they help you? Was there a book they put in your hands that changed your life? Guess what? You should carry 50 of those everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And that should be your calling card, is you give that book to people. If it was a podcast, like, you should be telling every single person you meet about that pod, because we all have a path as to how we got where we are. And then the easiest way to turn around and serve others is to reach out a hand and help walk them through the path you've already walked. And so it really does get simple and pretty linear, but we've got to actually fix ourselves before we can turn around and fix anybody else.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's where most people get stuck.
Well, and I think innately too, people don't think they're valuable enough to work on.
Yeah.
There's something there is a voice, there's a negative belief that tells them that you're not valuable enough, you're not good enough to take these steps. Kyle, I have struggled for years and years with my weight. And I have shared this. It's one of the last side effects of having a very high ACE score. So the trauma of my childhood that still lingers. And I won't go into all why that is. However, it is interesting that this year I stopped worrying about my weight. Now, this is crazy, you guys. Stopped worrying about my weight because I had bigger issues. I've got 2 companies to run. I have a daughter that's fighting for her life to live right now. I've got bigger issues, and I just let that go. I didn't put a lot of energy into it. But what I did do, this is interesting, is say, Athena, you're in emotional quicksand. This is how do you get out of emotional quicksand? And I'm like, well, you need to feed your body fuel to be able to get out of bed every day and do what you got to do. You got to go on the walk. You got to do, not to lose weight, okay? It's to have sustainability to do these other things. Well, I've lost 50 pounds in 7 months. By not focusing on that, but focusing on not the weight loss, right? But focusing on how do I get out of this emotional quicksand? How do I have the ability to get up every day and fight the fight? And acknowledging you can't do that, Athena, without good nutrition, good sleep, and moving your body.
Well,
changing my life.
How many chiseled people out there live with body dysmorphia, right? Like they're living with some form of eating disorder, like because they didn't get there for healthy reasons. Therefore, now they're trying to stay there for unhealthy reasons, right? Like there's all different aspects of our lives that, from the world's perspective, the world would go, "Woo, you're crushing it." But if we got there for bad reason, we're not going to reap the results that we ultimately want. And it was my story has been similar, but different in that, like, I stayed the fat guy for so long because I've always just been the confident fat guy. That was like, I don't need you to think I'm skinny for me to know how awesome I am. I don't give 2 craps what you think. And so, like, I just never. But most people are like, I just was tired of feeling embarrassed, and I was tired of it. I was like, well, I wish I could feel embarrassed because maybe that would help me. But that's just not how I'm wired. And so I've had to, like you, I've had to find different approaches.
Yeah.
Because just the natural reason as to why most people do it, it just didn't resonate with me.
Yeah. I will tell you, it's interesting that I saw this. So this is, I wasn't motivated enough to be attractive. Like, to get more attractive was not motivating for me.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. And there's historical reasons why that would be, right? You can unpack that too. But that wasn't motivation enough for me.
Yeah.
So again, and by the way, what's interesting is my weight was a huge factor in my imposter syndrome, feeling like I couldn't go achieve what I was supposed to achieve if I was an overweight person. I no longer believe that. I am not losing weight because I don't think I can achieve anymore. I'm losing it because if I don't eat well and exercise, I won't have the stamina to do the life that I have to live. Even if I do those things and I end up still 200-pound girl, I don't care.
Yeah.
What I care about is that my body has a resiliency. So I really want you guys to know that.
So good.
My weight was my biggest imposter thing. You can't do it. I've even told that. I mean, people have told me that you're never going to be, as a woman, this national big, what you want to do and make an impact in people's life because you look fat and lazy. And I'm always like, you think I'm lazy? Come and try to do a week in my life. Good luck.
That's right.
Yeah, they need just a little peephole into your life if anyone thinks you're lazy. Goodness.
Yeah. I'm like, really? I don't think so. And I'm not saying that cocky. I'm saying truthfully. But but it kept me back, Kyle. It kept me back. And I try. So I hope somebody's listening to this. Here's this big thing, this monkey, I call monkey on my shoulder. And I kept trying to get it off the traditional way. I let it go. And for me, I gave it to God. I said, God, you're asking me to surrender my daughter, so I can't worry about all this other stuff. Right? I can't. You're going to have to figure that out for me because I only got the energy to do this. And then changing that perspective of saying, okay, how do you do this? And then, you change your behaviors. So I want you guys, as you're listening to this, you may have an imposter syndrome that you need to actually say, okay, I'm not going to focus on it so much, but let me look at behaviors that I need to do just to have a good life. And that imposter syndrome may get smaller. That monkey on your shoulder may get smaller. Just a thought.
And can I add one thing to this? I wish this wasn't true, but I don't think most people are for other people.
You're right. Yeah.
I think it's easy to say that on the surface, and it's easy for me to see Jada's posts on Facebook and heart it. But for me to be able to genuinely cheer others on, that has to also mean that I'm satisfied with me.
Yes.
And because most people are not, they are unwilling to champion others. And so I think this is just why, as weird as it sounds, there's certain people in your circle that you need to either get rid of completely or at least stop saying certain things to them because they are not for you. Mm-hmm. They are for you as long as you remain at their level. But the moment they think you're moving on to a new level, they will do everything in their power to hold you back. And again, and it's not even in spite. It's because it keeps them from having to change. And so once I kind of realized that, it just gave me fresh perspective. Mel Robbins just came out with her brand new book called Let Them. And I just love the concept, right? That my 9-year-old yesterday came home from school and she was like, this girl was talking behind my back. Who freaking cares? Who cares? Do you want to be friends with her? No. Then what does it matter what she thinks? Let them. But so much of our struggle with imposter syndrome, I think, are self-inflicted wounds that we allow, and then they're open sores that we refuse to heal. And again, I think some of us self-sabotage because keeping that open sore keeps me from having to try.
Yeah.
And not trying allows me to always tell the story of what could have been.
Yeah. 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 I want to get into the rubber meets the road, Kyle, with our audience here for a second. But thank you so much for your insight. I obviously love you as a human. I appreciate your friendship so much. You have been with me. You've encouraged me. You are somebody in my tribe that I trust with those big, audacious goals. And I appreciate you sharing your heart and your wisdom. What I want to do now for the listeners is we promise you on this podcast to kind of give you some practical steps, although you just got a whole bunch of them in what we just said. So I hope you definitely save this one. I want to go into the rubber meets the road and then just to give you guys some practical things. One of the things that you guys can do to help with imposter syndrome, and science calls this a proof journal. Athena in her coaching calls this a success journal. And this is something I highly suggest. And I suggest it to I teach this, I coach this. Get yourself a journal, and every week, daily, weekly, whatever it is, but minimally weekly, write out what you did well. We spend so much time thinking about the negativity. I need you to write out your wins. And then write what you're proud of that you learned, or lessons that you learned this week. Start journaling those so that when you have self-doubt, you can pull it out. Okay? So you can pull it out and you can see that those lies are not true. All right? So I want you to think about that. One of the other things is, and this is interesting, this goes right back to what Kyle was saying. You have to watch your tribe, and you need to make sure that you literally ask yourself, somebody who cares about me, would they say this about me? Would they believe this about me? But again, you have to make sure it's somebody that believes in you, right? It can't be the people who told me because I'm a little overweight that I can't be successful. It can't be those people. It's got to be the people who believe in you. So you've got to ask yourself, what would somebody say? Would somebody say, Athena, you can't go on that stage, you can't? Or would somebody who believed in you say, yes, you can? So I need you to start using what would a friend say strategy to yourself in the moment. You go into a networking event and then you think, 30 seconds, right? You only have to be brave for 30 seconds. What would Athena say that I can do right now? What would Kyle say? What would Jada say? And have that, and do it afraid, but do it, and have the courage to go and do it. So that's another strategy that works. The other one is Kyle talked about this, we've got to take action. Okay. You've got to evaluate what is keeping me, what is the imposter syndrome, what are the voices talking about, identify them, go seek out, like he said, go find, how have you gotten through it before, right? Where is their wisdom? What's gotten you out of your quicksand before? What has stopped you from being in a fear-locked mode before? Or are there experts? For example, I shared I didn't Google how to lose weight. I Googled how to have energy every day in trauma. Okay? That's what I was asking. And it had nothing to do with weight loss or what exercises to do. I said, I am living in a war zone in trauma. What does my body need? So go look for the experts that can help you so that you can get through this and it doesn't entrap you. And then the last thing we want you to really think about, and Kyle brought this up, what is your purpose and what is your identity, right? You have to be rooted in an identity beyond just exterior. It has to be internal. And then what's your purpose? Because you don't want that imposter syndrome to steal your purpose. The world needs you to shine. We thank you so much for being here. If Jada and I always want you to know, if you have questions or you need to be connected with somebody to help you go deeper, reach out to us. We will make sure that we get you connected. But Kyle, can you tell the listeners who really felt fed by your information, how can they find you?
Sure. I'm Coach Kyle Draper on all social media platforms. KyleDraper.com is my website. And so I'm pretty findable.
That's funny. Jada, because what's next? Jada's going to say almost the exact same thing. This is funny.
Man, well, honestly, first I just want to say thank you, Kyle, for being here. This has been a vulnerable but very refreshing conversation. And so just appreciate your expertise and vulnerability today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Absolutely. And for our listeners, if you did enjoy this podcast, we would love to invite you to like and subscribe so you can join us next week. You can find us just about anywhere. So if you want to find us on other streaming platforms or social media, Google Athena Captain and you're bound to find us. We always joke about that. Yeah. But we do want to leave you out with something serious today. And that is, this is not your practice life. So don't wait for perfect. Start messy, start scared, just start. Because nothing changes until you do. So take one step today toward the life that you want and dare to share it with us. We'll be here standing with you every step of the way. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.